This is the Marketing Umbrella Podcast, where it's all about getting the information you need from successful leading marketers to build and grow your digital marketing agency. Brought to you by Itamar Shafir, founder and CEO of Umbrella, the technology platform and brand that is powering thousands of marketing agencies around the country. Find him at umbrellaus.com. Now, here's your host, Kevin Pruitt.
This is Kevin Pruitt with the Marketing Umbrella Podcast, and we have a very special guest today. He's the founder of Collective 54, the first mastermind community dedicated to helping professional services firms grow, scale, and exit. Prior to founding Collective 54, he started, scaled, and sold a consulting firm for 9 figures. That's a bunch of money. In addition, he's the author of the best-selling book, The Boutique: How to Start, Scale, and Sell a Professional Service Firm, and the host of the #1 podcast of the same name. He received his undergraduate degree as a Minuteman from the University of UMass and his MBA as a Ramblin' Wreck from Georgia Tech. Join me in welcoming our special guest, Greg Alexander, to the Marketing Umbrella Podcast. Greg, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Kevin, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
We've already had a little bit of a chit chat, and so do I have permission to ask what I asked you when we first got on the call?
Sure thing.
So I have watched a couple of episodes that Greg had done beforehand, and it was a little different background setting, but in the back was a Dallas Cowboy cheerleader. So I asked him, I said, I'm disappointed that we didn't have the Dallas Cowboy cheerleader background. He said, I'd have to turn the camera around, but he said, actually, I married her. So, man, I am also, let's just start off with that. Tell us the story, how you landed ended up with a Dallas Cowboy cheerleader.
Yeah, so my wife, Brooke Alexander, when she cheered, it was Brooke Wicker. So what's the story? So I moved to Dallas, Texas from Boston, Massachusetts in 1993. And I was with a technology company back then called EMC. And the people in the office felt bad that I was in a new city and didn't know anybody. And they set me up on a blind date. And the blind date was with Brooke. And when they first approached me and said, hey, we're going to set you up on a blind date, I actually was a little insulted because I said, boy, I must look really desperate and I need to be set up. And I didn't want to go. And then they said, do you realize she cheers for the Cowboys? And I figured, well, she cheers for the Cowboys. She must be a looker. I'm going to accept. And I did. And we've been married 27 years. So it's a crazy world that we live in. Luck plays a huge role in all of our lives.
Well, congratulations on 27 years. And we did chit chat. I told him, I said, I literally was wearing my Cowboys hat earlier today. I should have donned it for the interview. But Greg, so much to cover. And I told you before we started, I said, such a short bio, but such a complex history. So round out a little bit, add to what I mentioned in the bio that would lay a good foundation for our listeners.
Yeah. So, the easiest way to describe my professional life, which is now 30 years in the making, is in 3 chapters. And maybe this will give you some context. So the first chapter was that as an employee. So I mentioned I worked for a tech company called EMC, and I was very lucky. I got hired off the UMass campus and started as kind of an entry-level salesperson and rose up through the ranks there. That company did really well. And it was a meritocracy. So if you did well, you kept getting promoted. And I learned a lot of skills there. Most importantly, what life was like as an employee inside of a Fortune 500 company by the time I left, like 20,000 people. Then the second chapter of my life was that as an entrepreneur. So I went back to school, as you mentioned, at Georgia Tech to get my MBA, which is a great experience. And I learned that I was probably better suited to be an entrepreneur than an employee. So I decided to start a company. It was called SBI, which was what stood for Sales Benchmark Index. The easiest way to understand that is we were like a little mini McKinsey or a Bain. And we specialized in one thing, and that was business-to-business sales effectiveness. So clients hired us to help them improve the productivity of the sales force. And we were very successful there, me and my partners. I started in 2006, and we sold it in 2017. And I'll tell your audience the exact number. We sold it for $162 million. And please don't take that as me being arrogant or braggadocious. I mention that to be a counterpoint to those that say services-based companies, such as marketing agencies, your audience, can never really become big and have a big exit. And that's not true. And I'm walking proof of that. I mean, I started this thing from my kitchen table with no clients, no money, no services, right? So it is doable. And I'll share with you some of the things that we did to inspire your audience. And then the third chapter, which is the one I'm in right now, is that as an owner. So the proceeds that I made at EMC and the exit that I made at SBI, I put into a family office. It's called Capital 54, and we invest in one thing and one thing only, and that is founder-led services firms. And one of the firms that I invested in is called Collective 54, which takes a bunch of my time right now. And this is a mastermind community. So your audience might be familiar with something like a Vistage or an EO or a YPO. So we're a version of that.
Okay.
But we're specialized in 3 areas. One is we only serve the professional services industry. That's the reason why the number 54 is in the name, Collective 54. That's the industry code. So within that, there's marketing agencies, quite a few actually, consulting companies, IT service providers, architects, people that market, sell, and deliver expertise for a living. And so that's one industry. Within that segment, which is a huge segment, we focus on within that industry, which is a huge industry, we focus on one segment called the boutique, which is for us, let's say 25 to 250 employees, which means they're past the startup stage, but they're still a ways away from exiting. So they're in that kind of awkward period of adolescence. And all of our programming is built around helping them get through that period. And then we focus exclusively on the founder or the co-founders, the people that own the firm, because, eventually at some point, they want to be able to sell and monetize their life's work. And a lot of our programming is around that. So that's what I'm doing now. There's a few hundred members in the community. And, the marketing agency space is near and dear to my heart because there's a lot of growth happening there right now as it goes through its transformation.
Yep. And quantum change. I mean, every day is different. You wake up in a new world. It's like Groundhog Day. Wake up in a new world every day. But
exactly.
Let's go back to the distinction you made in like chapter 2 and chapter 3. Tell me in your mind the difference between, say, an entrepreneur and an owner. Is it you're thinking more I'm in the PE side of things as an owner? I'm in the, is that where you're kind of like we own it, but we're not running it type thing versus being an entrepreneur?
So an entrepreneur is usually an owner operator.
Right.
And then an owner doesn't operate. The owner puts up the money and hires an operator or operators to run the business. And that's the stage that I'm in right now. One thing that I would suggest, because it's a great question and maybe a nuance, is that, there's a lot of operators who really aren't owners. Yeah. They would like to be, but they're kind of operating a small business or a lifestyle firm, not necessarily something that's going to be a sellable asset in the future. And they don't know that. And one of the things that we hope to accomplish in Collective 54 is shine a light on that, because you kind of want to wear 2 hats, the owner hat and the operator hat, because if you do wear the 2 hats, eventually, because you're thinking like an owner, you'll be able to sell your firm for a lot of money someday. And
uniquely happened in the space you were in with your co-partners or whatever, the co-owners, that it moved from, we're a pretty good business, we're pretty successful, to there's a substantial leap, to get to $160 million. So looking back, what do you think some of the factors were, the variables that played into that formula that caused that incredible growth, other than the fact that we just figured out how to sell?
Yeah. Well, that's part of it for sure, but there's quite a bit more than that. So first is that we were extremely profitable. We had 52% EBITDA margins and 80% gross margins. And a lot of marketing agencies are running at margins much lower than that, which is a shame. They're giving away their services. If they learn how to price their services correctly, and if they learn how to go after the right problems and the right clients, those margins are doable. In fact, within Collective, we have several marketing agencies that are operating firms with that type of margin profile. So that would be one. Firms that can't run high profits and they get wrapped up around ego-driven metrics, things like number of heads. That's a mistake. Yeah. More employees, more problems, more employees, lower margins. You want fewer employees, but greater margins. So that would be one really big one. The second one is no custom work. Custom work is, when you're running around doing custom work, you can't scale because every new project's a snowflake.
Yep.
So you got to get really good at standardizing what you do, who you do it for, how you do it, and how you do it differently. And the world is, the market is so big for marketing agencies that sometimes agency owners think that if they narrow it down to that, they're leaving opportunity on the table. I would suggest just the opposite. If they get really focused, they can become the dominant provider in their space, which will justify a premium because everybody wants to buy the best. So that was another one. A third one would be tech enabling the firm. I think we're in the first inning of the AI era.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the opportunities here are going to be endless. I'm an optimist. Some people think AI is going to be a negative. I think it's going to be a positive. I think because, particularly in services, because the biggest expense, probably 80-90% of an expense on a P&L is headcount.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can keep headcount flat, but provide them a digital assistant, an AI assistant, their productivity, that meaning their output per hour, can go up dramatically. So, they can make a lot more money. So tech enabling a service would be huge. And then maybe one more that we did is we leveraged the global talent pool. There's brilliant people all over the world. And now post-pandemic, where everyone's working remotely,
Mm-hmm.
there's less of a stigma of working with talent in other parts of the world.
Yep.
And, for reasons outside of our control, the economics are different in different parts of the world.
Right.
And if you get good at that, you can build 24 hours a day instead of 8 and triple the size of your firm almost overnight.
And like you said, and the margins are affected positively, not negatively, so
exactly.
what you mentioned.
Yeah.
And you're changing the world of people in certain parts of the world. Even half of what we would pay in the States is a game changer, for other pairs. Other areas.
They're very capable. And even with that lower wage in their environment, it's still a very high paying job and like you said, can really improve their lives.
So I'm gonna put you in the Wayback Machine here. We're gonna go back to some early days, I think, in your firm. Especially the second thing you mentioned was, standardized work. Don't do custom work. And then you kind of rounded that off, almost like niche down on what the market. So those are really two separate issues, because you can niche down and still, have non-standardized product or services or whatever. So tell me how, like, if you're speaking to somebody that's really early in the journey, on building a firm. I just opened the doors last month. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to pay myself, let alone pay somebody else. How do they get to that point quickly?
Yeah. Well, I think the most important thing is you pick a problem that you're going to solve. Unfortunately, that's often forgot, and people think about the service they're going to provide.
Yeah.
That's the third decision you make. The first decision in those early days is, what's the problem that you're going to solve? And that problem has to have some attributes. So, for example, it needs to be urgent. If you're selling vitamins instead of pain pills, you're in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Because getting people, to prioritize effort and prioritize you is hard. But if they have an urgent problem, they're going to buy something. It's just a question of whether or not they buy it from you. So that would be number one attribute of a problem to pick. The second one is, people have to be willing to pay to solve it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people have urgent problems, but they try to bootstrap it and solve it themselves with internal resources.
Yeah.
And that's the wrong place to be. It's got to be something that they really can't do on their own, that they have to, hire an external third party for. So that would be another one. And then the third attribute of picking the right problem is, it needs to be pervasive. If only a handful of companies in the world are having the problem, you're in trouble. You want the problem to be all over the place. So starting with the problem would be step number one. And just doing that, by the way, gets you halfway there. I can't tell you how much time and money that you'll save as a result of that. Now, once you have a really good focused problem area, then you got to choose the clients you want to serve. And it becomes easier if you know what your problem is, because you know what types of clients are having those, but it can be a little complicated. What size of company you want to serve, what geographic region do you want to serve? What's the job title of the person in that account that you want to serve? What industry sector might they be in, et cetera, et cetera. So you got to really get good at picking the client. And then that leads to the third thing, which is, what solution are you going to provide? And if you're providing a complicated, difficult to deliver solution, and you're in the early days of your firm, you're in trouble.
Yep.
Because, the more difficult, the more complex, the more execution problems. In the early days, you have to deliver outstanding client satisfaction because you're going to depend on word of mouth and referrals. So if the service you're providing is tough and projects don't go so well, you have infant mortality. So really get focused on a solution that's fairly easy to deliver.
So how did you discover what that problem was, or what that itch was that needed to be scratched? I mean, what were some of the ways that you did that? I mean, I think sometimes we tend to jump into the solution of this is how you fix it without saying, actually, this is how I found out there was a problem.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing you got to do is realize that when you look in the mirror, the person looking back at you is irrelevant and doesn't matter. What matters are the prospects and the clients. So we advocate 5 listening techniques. And if you truly are client-centric and you use these 5 things, you'll learn what the problems are fairly easily. So the first one is, in speaking to prospects, is you got to do win-loss reviews. So after every sales campaign, whether you won it or you lost it, somebody reaches out to the client and says, hey, what really was the problem and why did you choose me or the bad guy? So that would be number one. And that is getting the voice of the customer from the prospect's perspective. Now, if you move to the client, you should be doing some version of NPS or client satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
And, same kind of concept. They'll tell you what the problems were. Very often you'll hear, hey, I was on a scale of 1 to 10 at client satisfaction, I'm only going to give you a 7. And you say, well, how do I go from a 7 to a 10? Well, you should have addressed this, this, and this. That's problem identification. So that's the second one.
Will they tell you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So because sometimes I'm thinking we just a little too euphemistic. No, you did a great job. Just wasn't the right time. Just, we decided to kind of focus and go in another area. I mean, you drill down and say, okay, let's really drill down on some questions here. So
yeah, I mean, you can't let them off the hook, right?
There you go.
I tell you if you're skilled at asking questions the right way and interrogating. Right? I'm also a big believer in client advisory boards. So at SBI, we had 4 client advisory boards. We served 4 personas, and we had 4 client advisory boards. And we would meet with them twice a year. Those client advisory boards, they were presenting to us. We weren't presenting to them. And what they presented were what their problems are. So like at the time of this recording, it's the fall of 2023. Many people are in the annual planning cycle.
Mm-hmm.
We would have our clients come to us and say, hey, what are your priorities for next year? So that's a big one. Big believer in post-project reviews. Now, this is the way to get employee feedback.
Yep.
So after every project, you say, hey, what went well, what didn't go well? And very often you'll see, hey, part of the project that didn't go well was this.
Mm-hmm.
Reason for that, it wasn't in scope.
I've met the enemy, and the enemy is me.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And then the last one, to round out the 5 listening techniques to find problems, is attend conferences. And the thing to pay attention here is don't go to the conferences of your industry, because you're in an echo chamber and all the vendors are talking to each other. You go to the conferences that your clients go to. Because the people that put on those conferences, they're going to talk about the things your clients should care about, and that's a great way to learn what the problems are.
I love that number 5, because I think so often it is an echo chamber. We get in and everybody's got to figure it out. I mean, the person that is the most successful is on stage telling the rest of us how to do it well, how they did it, but they're like, we're not listening to the clients anymore. We're listening to the solution providers. And, exactly. Sometimes we get a little deaf, in our success. But I remember, I don't remember if this was in like a written form, like an article I'd looked at that you were connected to, or if it was actually in a previous interview, but there was this reference to, I didn't have to work anymore, but you can only play so much golf and take so many vacations and stuff like that. So I love that you woke up one day and you were in Greece and thinking, what am I going to do come Monday? So walk us through that post exit epiphany that you had that says, what, I'm still young, I got life ahead of me.
Yeah. It was surprising. I was grinding it for so many years. And, it's hard being an entrepreneur. You're worrying about making payroll and clients and all that. It's very stressful. And when I sold my firm, I thought it was the finish line. I had, at least for me, I had made more money than I could ever want or need or spend. I had a tremendous sense of accomplishment and fulfillment. I felt self-actualized, that I had reached my potential. But I was only 47 years old, and that's the part that I missed. And don't get me wrong, my wife and I, we traveled all over the world for a couple of years and had a blast. But then I was like, okay, so, hopefully I'm going to live another 50 years or so. Like, what am I going to do? Right. And I never really, I don't know, like I didn't want to buy the Ferrari and, do all this kind of stupid stuff. Right. It was materialistic and based on consumerism. And I like nice things. Don't get me wrong. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's somewhat shallow.
Yeah.
So I started challenging myself as to, okay, so I'm now in the second half of my life. I'm in the role of being able to offer something, play the role of mentor. And I had been doing some informal coaching, if you will. After I sold my firm, there was a cultural transformation, and a lot of the early pioneers that helped me in the early days left and went on and started their own firms. And I felt a deep sense of obligation to them. And I was helping those people get those firms off the ground, and they were having a lot of success. And some of that success, certainly not all of it, but a part of it, they were attributing back to the counsel that I gave them. And I started to wonder, I'm like, is that an opportunity? And I'm a big believer in communities. I was an EO when I was small, then I graduated to YPO. And then when I sold my firm, I graduated to Tiger 21. And this concept of peers learning from peers, I really like that business model. So I said, I wonder if I could do that, because the individualized coaching, it was impacting maybe, I don't know, 5 people a year or something like that. And now with Collective 54, I'm impacting hundreds of people in a community. And they're impacting each other because they're helping each other. And it's incredibly fulfilling. So that's what I decided to do. And it's been a great journey. And it's like the perfect blending now for me, because, again, I don't run it. But, I'm a subject matter expert, if you will, a coach, and my team is running it.
Yep. And
it's been great. Yeah.
And it's kind of the perfect balance that says I'm still in the game, but yet I'm not. I don't have the pressures of being, the starting quarterback anymore type thing. So
yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting too when the profit motive is gone. Like, I mean, I want the firm to be profitable, and it is, because I want my team to have, good compensation and career opportunities and job stability. But I don't take any money out of it. I really don't care. My enjoyment is being around the members and helping them be successful.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the whole idea. There's this book called, the famous book called Halftime, where, you get to this move from success to significance, this whole idea. So, another Texan, I think, that wrote that, but it is Bob Buford. Yes. So there are 2 questions that came to my mind as you were talking about. Number one is I want to ask you, so briefly, just kind of describe the benefits and maybe the shortcomings of, say, one-to-one coaching versus being in a mastermind.
Yeah.
Can we compare those 2?
Yeah, I recommend both. In fact, let me take a step back and kind of give you some of Greg's philosophy for what it's worth. I think an entrepreneur needs 4 people on their team. Think of this as like your own kind of board of advisors. So first and foremost, you need a role model. And I define the role model as somebody who you cannot meet, you don't know, but they did something that you want to model yourself after. So, for example, and sometimes these people are deceased. So my role model when I had SBI was a guy named Marvin Bauer. And Marvin took over for James O. McKinsey in 1932 upon his death and built McKinsey as we know it. And because of that incredible success of that company, there's been much written on him. So I literally could study him as a subject. And I modeled my own behavior as a founder and a leader of a consulting firm after him. So I think all members of your audience should seek role models or role model. So that's one. Number 2, I think everybody needs a mentor. And a mentor is different than a role model in that you do have access to the mentor. But there's a very important distinction here with a mentor, and that is they cannot have any skin in the game. So they can't be charging you a fee. They can't be your boss. There can be nothing in it for the mentor to be a real mentor. They have to be pure. And when they are pure, those conversations can get authentic in a hurry.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Really tell you, hey man, you're screwing up, stop doing this, blah, blah, blah. And you have to learn how to be a good mentee. You have to be, open and willing to get feedback. So that's the second one. Third one is you need peers. And this is where a mastermind community comes in. And a peer is different than a mentor and a role model in that they're of similar experience level. They're kind of in the seat that you're in, and they're dealing with the same stuff you're dealing with. It's so helpful because being a founder and entrepreneur can be very lonely. And if you have an opportunity to call somebody up and say, hey, have you ever run into this? And they say, oh yeah, let me give you my war stories on that. And it's a bi-directional kind of information exchange. That's really, really important. And that's where communities, ours and others like it, come into play. And then the last one is a coach. And a coach is where you go one-on-one. And the coach is somebody who's been there and done that. But the one word of caution I would give you is they couldn't have been there and done that like 10 years ago or 20 years ago, because the world's moving too quick. And sometimes and I'm one of them now, sometimes these gray hair guys, they can become obsolete in a hurry. So a coach needs to be like, I don't know, maybe 5 years ahead of you.
A recent practitioner.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. So, and as you can see, to answer your question directly, how complementary the coach is versus the peer versus the mentor versus the role model. And it really is, because I don't think there's no silver bullet, right? So getting multiple perspectives from those four constituencies, I think, is the key.
Yeah, I love the distinction you made. And really, I mean, you hear about mentoring versus coaching all the time. And what is the difference in those two things? And I think, one key factor is it paid or not?
Exactly.
Do they have any equity in the outcome type thing? But the second question is, it's so funny because you actually almost answered my second question in your first answer, but I want you to maybe touch on it a little more and drill down how you deal with this. You just mentioned about, you don't get a coach that's, out of the game for 10 years or whatever. It's not always the time difference. It could be the scale difference as well. So I'm looking at, you sold your company for 160 million. How can you even identify with me as starting a 2-person boutique, not even boutique, a pre-boutique firm that I'm just trying to get business and pay the light bill right now? I mean, can you remember what that was like? Is that a fair question?
It is a fair question. And that's why members of Collective 54 wouldn't rely on me for that. The way we do our cohorts is we do it by membership tier. So let me explain that. So we have a growth tier, a scale tier, and an exit tier. And those tiers are very precise based on the stage of the firm. So for example, if you were just getting started, then you would clearly be in the growth tier, and there would be other people like you. In other words, there really are peers.
Right.
Listening to Greg talking about his big exit 20 years after the fact, I mean, I guess there's some benefit to that because you kind of want to see where you're headed, but on the same token, it's too far removed that it's
aspirational and frustrating at the same time.
Exactly.
That's right.
Yeah. And then the scale tier is very different because, you're not worried about going out of business. The challenge you have there is you're working 70 hours a week and you're burning the candle at both ends and you got to work smarter, not harder. Different set of challenges.
Yep.
And then the exit tier, you're thinking about, can I actually sell this thing for how much and to who and on what terms? A whole different set of challenges. So it's so important to put these things into a tier. And the way that I stumbled into that is that, as I mentioned, I was a member of EO, I was a member of YPO, a member of Tiger 21. And although I had great experiences from them, there was something off with all three of those. And that was they didn't have membership tiers. And there was no industry specificity. So, I'd be sitting next to a guy that had 300 barbecue restaurants. Brilliant person, glad I know him. But from a business perspective, I'm really not going to learn much there. I might learn a lot on the personal side, and I did. And I'm sure he felt the same way about me. But I mean, he's worrying about the price of brisket.
Yeah.
Like
That's his
just
margin. That's right.
exactly right. So I really felt there was an opportunity here to be industry based, and that could be the difference. So that's how we deal with that issue.
Yeah. I love that answer. That is that is so clear, and it seems so apparent, in retrospect. I mean that they wouldn't have recognized that, previously. But I got so many questions that could come to mind that I could ask you, but I really just want to carve you out some space here right before we kind of head into our rapid fire round. But just take a moment. Is there something that I haven't touched on that you think you would like to share that you think would be helpful to, especially, marketing agency owners and those that are trying to grow and scale agencies? What's one thing that you just want to kind of share, just freewheel here?
Yeah. The thing that I would probably share with that definition, founder of a marketing agency, is that we are in the golden era of marketing agencies. It's a growth industry. The amount of money that's being spent is enormous. And the reason for this is because of digital transformation. Yep. And that is, every industry and every function within an industry is currently being disrupted, and that's going to kick into high gear with AI, as we're seeing already with ChatGPT and others. And it's impossible for clients to keep all the expertise in-house. One day, TikTok's the hot thing. And then the next day, there's problems with China and privacy, and no one wants to use TikTok, right? So imagine being a VP of marketing having to deal with that. Like it's a whipsaw. So for them, it's so much easier to rent than it is to hire full-time employees. And just because of that, it's creating so much demand for marketing agencies. And a lot of the marketing agency owners that I found, I have to say, and I'm going to anger some people by saying this, they think they know everything. And it's their first go at it. It's their first time as a founder. And because they've had some early success, their head is swelling. And I will tell you, because I was you. But back in the day when SBI was on its growth spurt, my ego was the size of Texas. And no one could tell me anything. And just be careful there, right? And consider, that maybe you don't have all the answers. And that you can learn a lot from people. As I mentioned, those fours: role models, mentors, peers, and coaches. And, invest in yourself. The success of your firm will be highly correlated to the success of you as an individual. Meaning, if you invest in developing yourself as an entrepreneur and a founder, your firm is going to grow about the same rate. So I would encourage all of you to consider Collective 54. And I know that sounds like a sales pitch. If not me, consider another group. Just get involved in some group and just open your mind up a little bit, swallow a little humble pie, and invest in your own development. That's what I would.
With remote work now, I mean, people are so isolated too. I mean, this is a great, entrepreneurs are the loneliest people on the planet sometimes, because who else gets me other than another entrepreneur? So, I think that's advice well heeded for sure. But I warned you a little bit. We're going to jump into the rapid fire, really short answers. First thing that comes to mind, just boom, boom, boom. We're going to go through these. So, did you get along with your parents growing up?
As a teenager, I was rebellious, but outside of that, yes.
Weren't we all? That's right. Do you have siblings?
I do. I'm the youngest of four.
Do you have any pets?
I do. I have my favorite boy, Red. He's my dog.
What kind of dog?
Boston Terrier.
Oh, of course he is. That's right. Kids?
No kids, just my wife and I.
What time do you wake up in the morning?
I'm an early riser, about 5 a.m.
And what time do you normally turn that light off at the evening?
Early to bed, no later than 9.
All right. This is a crazy question for you. Ideal vacation spot, since you've probably been all over the world. So ideal vacation spot, money, not an object.
Yeah. So we have a cabin in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. That's what we love to go.
Oh, I can understand that too. How does faith affect how you operate?
It doesn't.
So if you had one day to be king of the marketing world, what is one thing you would change about the marketing space?
I would put more former CMOs in the role of CEO.
So more CMOs to CEO. All right. Greg, thank you, man. Thanks for taking the time today. It's been such a pleasure to chat with you and just to hear your story and the wisdom and insights that you've shared with our audience. And is there anything that I haven't asked you about that you just want to wrap us up with today, and then maybe tell people where the best place to find you online?
No, I mean, you asked a great question. I had a lot of fun, Kevin. So thanks for having me. So to respond to your question, where to find us. So collective54.com, and that's the number 54. If you're interested, you can apply for membership, and somebody will get in contact with you. If you're not quite ready for that and you want to read some more, my book is called The Boutique: How to Start, Scale, and Sell a Professional Services Firm. You can find that on Amazon. And then if you like podcasts, which clearly if you're listening to this one, you do, you might check out the ProServe podcast, which is hosted by me, and you can find that on all your podcast players.
And that is great. We'll make sure that all those are in the show notes. And just like I mentioned, once again, thanks for just taking time to share with your expertise and share your wisdom, because we're just trying to help marketing agency owners grow and scale their business. And the Marketing Umbrella podcast was designed just for that. Greg, thanks again. Have a great day.
Okay. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you for tuning in to another great episode of the Marketing Umbrella podcast, where we provide the information you need from successful leading marketers to build and grow your digital marketing agency. To learn more, go to umbrellaus.com.